Welcome back to Idiot Mystic. This is part 6 of my series on David McGowan's weird scenes inside the canyon. Up to this point, we've gone through Laurel Canyon from a few different angles. We started with Lookout Mountain, military family backgrounds, and the weird fact that this supposed birthplace of hippie innocence had a secret military film facility sitting right above it like a very normal, not suspicious thing at all. Then we moved into Vito and the Freaks, Kenneth Anger, Bobby Beausoleil, Charles Manson, Dennis Wilson, Terry Melcher, Jim Morrison, The Doors, The Death List, The Byrds. This list is getting long, but I talked about Buffalo Springfield and the Monkees too. And I guess it's fair to mention the question of how much of the 1960s sound was actually spontaneous, and how much of it was packaged, polished, managed, and sold. Now we move into something a little different. Not just the music, but the parents of the scene. Because every scene has them, whether it admits it or not. The older figures, the hosts, the people with houses, the people who decide who gets access, who gets protected, who gets turned into a star, and who gets left wandering around the kitchen at 3 a.m., like in my case. This episode focuses on John Phillips and Frank Zappa. John Phillips becomes one of the great faces of the official flower power dream. The Mamas and the Papas gave the era some of its most beautiful, warm, instantly recognizable music. The sound that still feels like California being sold in a bottle. Sunshine, harmonies, longing, free love, sadness, and just enough melancholy to make the dream feel expensive. But McGowan doesn't leave that image untouched. He looks at Phillips as more than a songwriter. He looks at him as a kind of architect of the scene. This person connected to the creation and management of the hippie image itself. Then there's Frank Zappa. Zappa is weird because he lived inside the same world, but he mocked it constantly. He wasn't exactly a hippie. He was suspicious of hippies, suspicious of drugs, suspicious of the softness of the scene. He was suspicious about everything. And yet, his log cabin became one of the famous houses in the canyon, a place filled with musicians, freaks, hangers-on, and cultural electricity. So on one side, you have John Phillips, the flower crown. On the other side, Frank Zappa, the anti-hippie father. One of them sells the dream. The other sneers at the dream while still living right in the middle of it. That's why this is so important to talk about. Because by this point in the series, Laurel Canyon is so much more than just a neighborhood. It's starting to look like a family system of some sort. A very talented, very druggy, very unstable family system with great harmonies and some very questionable adults in the room. I'm kind of tired of asking who made the songs. I want to know who was guiding the scene, and whether the kids who thought they were escaping authority had simply found new fathers wearing weirder clothes. So let's get into John Phillips, the Mamas and the Papas, Frank Zappa, the log cabin, and the bizarre parental energy of Laurel Canyon. John Phillips is hard to discuss because he stands so close to what I think was the softest part of the dream. If Jim Morrison gave the canyon a dark doorway, I think John Phillips gives it the flower crown. Papa John, the patriarch of the Mamas and the Papas, the writer of songs that turned California into an inner state, co-writer of San Francisco, the song that called a generation west with flowers in their hair, organizer of Monterey Pop, the festival that helped turn the counterculture from local scenes into public mythology. The Mamas and the Papas are easy to love from a distance. The sound is warm, polished, and undeniably human. The voices blend like the song itself is a little house where lonely people can stand together for 3 minutes. California Dreamin' still works because it captures something almost everyone knows. The desire to be somewhere warmer, somewhere more possible, somewhere your actual life has not found you yet. John Phillips understood the dream well enough to package it. Monterey Pop became a coronation. Rock music was presented as art, and the counterculture was presented as legitimate world. The local scene was translated into public mythology. Jimi Hendrix, The Who, Ravi Shankar, Janis Joplin, Otis Redding, the Mamas and the Papas, and so many other musicians gave the event the feeling of a new cultural order revealing itself on camera. San Francisco was one of the clearest examples of manufactured innocence in American pop culture, at least at the time. It sounds gentle, open, almost like a blessing. If you're going to San Francisco, wear flowers in your hair. That is beautiful if you're young, miserable, and convinced your parents' world is just a prison. It's also marketing, though. The song helped turn San Francisco into a pilgrimage site. It made the journey sound safe, holy, inevitable, and scented with flowers and communal tenderness. The reality waiting for many young people was harsher. Runaways and minors arrived. People with no money arrived. People looking for God, drugs, love, family, and disappearance all arrived. Some found beauty, and others found predators. The song called people toward a place without being responsible for what happened after they got there. Then, the private story around Phillips becomes dark enough that the flower crown starts looking obscene. Mackenzie Phillips later publicly alleged that her father severely physically assaulted her when she was 19, and that an abusive, incestuous relationship followed. Family responses were fractured, with belief, denial, anger, and pain all part of the public aftermath. I don't think the point here is to shock you. The point is that certain allegations change the moral weather around an artist. Papa John becomes harder to hear. The family band warmth becomes harder to separate from the possibility of severe private violation. The counterculture already had a father problem. So many of its stars were running from fathers, replacing fathers, imitating fathers, becoming fathers to scenes, or being entirely consumed by father wounds. John Phillips stands in the middle of that as one of the men who gave the movement a warm parental sound. The Mamas and the Papas themselves sound like chosen family. I think that was part of the appeal. A generation was leaving old family systems. The band sounded like a new one, softer and freer. But chosen families can repeat the old wound with better music. Public softness can hide private violence. A beautiful song can come through a damaged or harmful person. I think that's one of the painful facts of art. We want a song about love to mean the writer understands love ethically. We want harmony to mean the people singing are safe. We want the person who gives us innocence to possess innocence. From my experience, art doesn't work that way. Sometimes beauty is confession. Sometimes it's compensation. Other times it's camouflage. Sometimes it's the only clean thing a damaged person can still produce. The Mamas and the Papas music survives because it captures longing so well. We don't have to deny that. But after McGowan, California is no longer only the place where dreams come true. It's the place where dreams get processed. It's where longing becomes a product before people fully understand what they're carrying. John Phillips shows us how a movement can sound like family while being built by people who hadn't yet healed their own. Now, Frank Zappa is super weird because he stands both inside and outside the dream. John Phillips sold the soft version. Flowers, harmonies, westward invitation. Zappa mocked the hippies. He distrusted peace and love aesthetics, vague spiritual talk, and druggy innocence. I don't think he would really like this podcast. He looked at the 60s like a man who had already smelled the garbage under the incense. Yet, he was right in the middle of it. If Laurel Canyon was a stage, Zappa was definitely the sarcastic stage manager, telling everyone the play was stupid while continuing to run the lights. He lived in the log cabin. He gathered musicians, freaks, dancers, eccentrics, and broken young people all around him. He became a patriarch of freak culture, but not really a gentle one. He was the controlling father, the composer father, the satirical dad, the dad who saw through everyone but still wanted the room arranged around his intelligence. McGowan is fascinated by Zappa because his family background fits the book's pattern. His father worked in military-related chemical and biological warfare spaces, including Edgewood Arsenal. Again, a father's work does not convict a son, but symbolically, the son of a chemical warfare world becomes the architect of free culture. I think that's pretty hard to ignore. Zappa's anti-drug stance is also important to note. In a scene drenched in LSD, cannabis, speed, alcohol, and everything else, he often presented himself as disciplined, work-focused, and contemptuous of druggy collapse. He wasn't selling acid mysticism. He was selling satire, complexity, ugliness, and an intellectual contempt for American stupidity. I think that gave him power. A person who remains sober in a room full of intoxicated people often has an advantage. He remembers and sees more. He can direct. He can observe everyone else's weaknesses while appearing above them. In a chaotic scene, the controlled person becomes a hidden authority. Zappa was exactly that kind of authority. His music could be weird, obscene, funny, and purposefully ugly, but it was often extremely controlled. He demanded skill from musicians. He was obsessed with virtuosity. He arranged sounds like a composer and not some kind of campfire prophet. His rebellion wasn't based on letting go. It was based on dominating form. I think that makes him a bizarre mirror of the military world he supposedly rejected. Military culture values discipline, hierarchy, and control over chaos. Zappa's musical world, in freakish form, also valued many of those things. The content was anti-establishment, but the method could almost be militarily exacting. We often rebel against the content of our upbringing while preserving its form. And this gives us something to reflect on in ourselves as well. What parts of your upbringing are you unknowingly carrying with you and into your interactions with others? The GTOs show the gender question inside Zappa's orbit. Girls together outrageously were young women associated with Zappa's scene. Miss Pamela, Miss Mercy, Miss Christine, and others. Zappa produced their album Permanent Damage. They were funny, strange, stylish, and part of the visual social energy of the canyon. Some had agency and creativity, but the power imbalance remains. The men had contracts, bands, instruments, press, and mythic status. The women had proximity, beauty, personality, and the ability to make a scene feel alive. Now, those things aren't nothing, but they are precarious. Rock history often gives men discographies, and all women get are nicknames. Zappa's genius was for sure there, but it doesn't purify the room. Seeing through something isn't the same as standing above it morally. A satirist can exploit people by pretending everything is a joke, just as a sentimental artist can exploit people by pretending everything is love. I don't think Zappa should be the villain of the episode. He was too intelligent, too original, too musically important, and probably too useful as a critic. But I don't think he should be the hero either. He's more like the canyon's bitter conscience. Harsh, controlling, often right, often ungentle, and still caught in the same haunted geography as everything else. He claimed to see the absurdity of the circus, but he was also one of its ringmasters. I know this one was kind of short, but this is where I want to leave part 6. I think John Phillips and Frank Zappa are such useful figures in this story because they show two different versions of power inside the counterculture. Phillips gives you the beautiful version, the harmonies, the flower crown, the California dream, the feeling that everyone is young, wounded, desirable, and somehow about to be saved by music, sex, sunshine, and maybe one extremely questionable group living arrangement. Zappa gives you the sharper version, the sarcasm, the control, the refusal to buy the hippie mythology at face value, the man standing inside the scene while making fun of the scene, which is always a powerful position because you get to benefit from the world while acting like you're above it. And that's one of the weirdest patterns in Laurel Canyon. The movement claimed it was rejecting old authority, but it still produced authority figures. It still had houses people wanted to get into. It still had men people wanted approval from. It still had gatekeepers, hosts, tastemakers, producers, older figures, and people who could decide whether you were part of the magic or just another person standing outside the room. Again, this doesn't make all of the music fake, and it doesn't mean everyone involved was evil, but it does make the clean story so much harder to believe. The official story says the counterculture was young people escaping the world of their parents. McGowan's version keeps asking why so many new parents were waiting for them when they got there. That, to me, is the uncomfortable part. Because a lot of people don't actually escape authority. They just change the costume authority is wearing. Instead of a uniform, it becomes a leather jacket. Instead of a church, it becomes a recording studio. Instead of a strict father telling you what to do, it becomes a charismatic older artist telling you that your freedom depends on staying close to him. And honestly, that pattern didn't die in the 60s. It's still everywhere. Spiritual scenes do it. Music scenes do it. Internet scenes, fitness scenes, political scenes, they all do it. Any place where lonely people gather around meaning, someone eventually figures out how to become the father of the room. That's why this episode feels important beyond history. I don't think John Phillips and Frank Zappa are just old names from an old scene. I think they're representatives of a question that keeps coming back. Who gets to define rebellion after rebellion becomes popular? In the next episode, we'll move into Arthur Lee, love, Brian Wilson, and the Beach Boys. That's where the California dream starts sounding less like sunshine and a lot more like a panic attack with perfect harmonies. Thank you for listening to Idiot Mystic. Subscribe if you're following the series, and check out the book. I'll probably see you in part 7, or maybe before then.